In the moments just before Jesus brought Lazarus back to life, something remarkable took place. He entered into communion with the divine. Yet the specific technique he employed in those critical moments, the actual internal transformation that came right before the supernatural event unfolded, has disappeared from contemporary Christian practice. This loss didn't happen because someone deliberately concealed it from the faithful. Rather, it occurred because what Jesus did requires a specific approach, a concrete practice that most modern religious instruction simply doesn't cover anymore. Have you ever experienced that hollow feeling when you pray as though your words are drifting out into empty space, vanishing into nothingness, with nobody on the receiving end? Do you know that sensation of speaking into an abyss where silence is the only response? If so, understand that you're far from being the only person who feels this way. The instruction you received taught you that prayer means having a conversation with the Almighty, making your requests known, begging for intervention, holding on to the hope that perhaps your petition will be granted if it aligns with divine will, if the circumstances are favorable, if your level of faith measures up to some invisible standard. And in those inevitable moments when absolutely nothing changes, when no answer comes, the explanation you're given is that the divine rejected your request, or perhaps your faith fell short of what was required, or maybe the mysterious plan of the Almighty simply lies beyond what your human mind can comprehend. But here's the truth that almost nobody is willing to share with you. The approach Jesus actually used when he communed with the divine looked nothing like what you've been taught. When Jesus positioned himself in front of the tomb where Lazarus lay dead, he didn't make a request to the Almighty, asking for life to return to his friend's body. He didn't engage in pleading or attempt to strike some kind of bargain with heaven. What the Gospel of John chapter 11 records is actually something quite astonishing. Jesus raised his gaze upward and spoke these words, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." Pay close attention to something crucial here. Look carefully at the tense of that statement. He expressed gratitude to the divine for something that had not yet manifested in physical reality, speaking as though the miraculous event had already reached completion, even though there existed absolutely no visible evidence that anything had changed. What we're looking at here is not a petition for divine intervention. This represents something entirely different from what we've come to understand as prayer. Trace your way backward through the Gospel accounts, and you'll discover this identical pattern repeating itself before each miraculous demonstration. In the second chapter of Mark, when Jesus healed the man who couldn't walk, the written account tells us that Jesus perceived the faith of those present, and then he spoke words of healing. But in that space between his observation and his declaration, something significant occurred that the gospel writer doesn't explicitly identify or name. When he multiplied food to feed 5,000 hungry people, the text indicates he looked toward heaven first. And this wasn't an act of requesting, but rather one of achieving harmony with the divine. When he defied natural law by walking across the surface of water, the 14th chapter of Matthew's Gospel informs us that he climbed up the mountainside by himself to commune with the divine before accomplishing what seemed impossible. Before bringing healing to the woman who had suffered with bleeding for so many years, Jesus was aware that power had moved outward from his being. The healing wasn't something he consciously decided to perform. He was already existing in a condition where divine energy could move freely through him without obstruction. There's a reliable pattern we can observe across all these accounts. He withdrew himself from the press of people around him. He sought out solitude and isolation. Something shifted within his interior awareness, and then power manifested. The question that almost nobody thinks to ask goes like this: if Jesus provided clear and straightforward instruction, regarding the proper way to pray. Why does Christianity in the modern era approach it as though it's some kind of unsolvable mystery, instead of treating it as a learnable technique? In the 6th chapter of Matthew's Gospel, Jesus speaks words that most people completely misinterpret for their entire lives. His instruction goes like this: "When you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret." You've probably heard pastors and teachers interpret this as guidance about maintaining privacy during prayer. Go find yourself a quiet spot somewhere. Don't make a show of your spiritual practice. Pray in a location where other people won't observe you. And while there's certainly some truth to that interpretation on a surface level, it completely fails to grasp what Jesus was actually communicating. The specific Greek word that he used, which gets translated as room, is Tamon. That word doesn't refer to a bedroom in your house or a closet or a cupboard. The actual meaning points to an inner chamber, a treasury, a concealed space that exists inside of something else. Jesus isn't offering you practical advice about finding the right external location for your prayer time. What he's actually doing is providing you with a map that leads to an interior space within your own being. He's telling you that when you engage in true prayer, you need to travel inward, moving into that part of your existence that lies beyond your constant stream of thoughts, beyond the constructed identity you present to the world, beyond all the noise and chatter that fills your conscious mind from moment to moment. Journey into your inner chamber, that hidden room that exists inside you. And then, and this detail carries critical importance, he instructs you to close the door behind you. He doesn't say to try your best to focus while minimizing distractions around you. The instruction is to close the door. Seal it completely. Shut out the entire world of sensory input silence. The endless internal dialogue of your mind. Block out that version of yourself that walks around, feeling afraid and constantly wanting and continually asking for things. Why? Because the divine presence doesn't exist somewhere out there in distant space, listening to your words from far away. The Father exists in secret, hidden away in that inner chamber, dwelling in the place that most people never gain access to, for the simple reason that they don't even realize such a place exists within them. And Jesus made the journey to that interior location every single time before power moved through his being and out into the world. This isn't speculation or guesswork on our part. It's a pattern that repeats consistently throughout the gospel accounts. Every healing, every supernatural demonstration, every single instance where invisible reality became visible and tangible, it followed this same sequence without exception. First came the inward journey, then came the alignment with the divine, then came silence and stillness. And only after all of that did power manifest. But here's where the problem comes in, and it's a significant one. Nobody ever taught you how to make that journey inward. The instruction you received told you to close your eyes and immediately start speaking words. You were taught to think thoughts about the divine, to create a mental image of him listening attentively to you, to hope desperately that he's paying attention to what you're saying. But here's a distinction that changes everything. Thinking thoughts about the divine is not the same thing, not even close to the same thing, as actually entering into that place where the presence of the divine exists and can be experienced directly. And that distinction, that crucial difference, explains why the miracles stopped happening. It's not that the divine stopped listening to people's prayers. It's that the technique, the actual hands-on practice of entering the inner chamber and closing the door, was slowly lost over time as Christianity transformed from small communities focused on contemplative practice into a religion of empire that needed to function on a massive scale. You can't turn silence into a system. You can't create a standardized curriculum for interior development that works the same way for everyone. You can't train priests and clergy to guide people into an interior space when many of those religious leaders have never successfully entered that space themselves. And so the instruction remained there in the written text for anyone to read, but the actual practice, the how-to knowledge that makes the instruction functional, gradually faded away from common teaching until it was nearly forgotten. What survived and continued were rituals that people could perform by rote prayers that could be memorized word for word, external forms that could be followed without any requirement to develop the interior capacity that Jesus was actually describing. The words stayed preserved in Scripture. The method for making those words come alive was lost to the majority of believers. So let me tell you clearly what Jesus understood, what he knew in his bones knowledge that's almost completely absent from contemporary Christian teaching. Prayer, real prayer, isn't about persuading the divine to do something. It's about achieving coherence between yourself and the source of all that exists. Let me repeat that statement because this is where everything pivots and changes direction. Prayer. The specific kind that Jesus practiced and demonstrated isn't about convincing the divine to take action on your behalf. It's about entering into a state of complete alignment where you and the ultimate source are no longer functioning as separate entities operating independently. It's about reaching a place where your individual will and the will of the divine aren't in conflict with each other or engaged in some kind of negotiation. They become the same thing, where there's no gap anymore, no distance separating you, no division or separation, just complete union and oneness. And when you speak from that place of unity, you're not hoping and wishing that reality will shift to match your desires. You're recognizing and acknowledging that reality has already shifted at the level of cause. That's the reason Jesus spoke using past tense grammar when he stood outside Lazarus' tomb. That's the reason he offered thanks to the divine before the miracle appeared in visible form. Because from inside that inner chamber, from that place of total and complete alignment with Source, the future and the present moment collapse into a single unified experience. What your physical eyes can observe hasn't caught up to the deeper reality yet. But in the realm of causation, in the invisible dimension where things originate, the work is already finished and complete. So you don't speak from a place of wanting and lacking. You don't speak from a place of hoping something might happen. You don't speak from that anxious place where you're asking and wondering if you'll receive. Instead, you speak from agreement, from alignment, from that interior location where the will of the divine and your personal will are no longer divided into two separate things. Listen carefully to how Jesus himself described this dynamic in the 14th chapter of John's Gospel. His words were these, "The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works." He's not taking personal credit for what happens. He's not claiming that he possesses some kind of special personal power. What he's saying is this: I'm not the one doing these things. The divine is doing them through me as I become a willing vessel. But notice something important here. He doesn't say the divine is doing it for him as though he's requesting favors, and he doesn't say it's being done to him as though he's a passive victim. He says through him. Jesus transformed himself into the vessel, the doorway, the precise location where heaven and earth met and merged. And he accomplished that transformation by entering the inner chamber and closing the door to everything that wasn't aligned with the divine. Only from that interior place can true power flow. If you attempt to speak from your personality, from your ego, from your separated mind that still believes it's alone and cut off from Source. Nothing of significance happens in response to your words. Why? Because you're not aligned with Source. You're still standing outside the door, still operating from that place of lack and need and separation. And the outer world, the physical realm where things manifest, doesn't respond to separation. It responds to Source. And you only gain access to Source when you go where Jesus went, making that inward journey behind the closed door into the silence that exists before thought arises, before your constructed identity forms, before the noise of your own constant wanting fills your awareness. This is the reason he spent 40 days in the wilderness before his ministry began. This is the reason he climbed up the mountain to pray before choosing the 12 disciples who would follow him. This is the reason he withdrew to solitary places again and again and again. Even when crowds were pressing in on him from all sides, desperate people crying out for his attention. He wasn't recharging his energy. He wasn't simply resting his physical body. He was realigning himself with Source. He was returning to the inner chamber, closing the door once again, and remembering his true identity beyond the human personality. And every single time he completed that practice, he came back carrying power. Now here's what I'm going to offer you, what I'm going to place in your hands. Not the complete method in its entirety, because the inner chamber only opens itself for those who are willing to remain at the threshold, willing to wait patiently. But I will give you the entry point, the foundational practice that makes everything else possible down the road. If your genuine desire is to go where Jesus went to access what he accessed, you have to stop doing what you've been doing up until now. Stop talking to the divine inside your head. Stop making requests. Stop wanting things to be different. Stop creating mental images of the divine somewhere out there in space, listening to you from a distance. Instead, here's what you need to do, what you need to actually practice. Find somewhere you can sit where you won't be disturbed or interrupted. Let your body become still. Close your eyes. And instead of immediately launching into prayer the way you've been trained to do, instead of starting to speak words right away, just breathe. I'm not talking about special breathing techniques or complicated methods. Just notice the breath that's already moving in and out of your body. Feel the sensation of air moving inward. Feel the sensation of air moving outward. And with each exhale, with each outward breath, consciously choose to let go of one layer of noise that fills your mind. Let go of those thoughts about everything you need to accomplish later today. Let go of that conversation you had earlier that's still playing on repeat in your mind. Let go of that version of yourself that's worried and anxious about tomorrow or constantly replaying what happened yesterday. Just breathe. Let it go. And as you continue this process, begin to feel around for the place that exists behind your thoughts, searching for the stillness that's always present underneath the mental chatter, the silence that exists beneath the noise. It's subtle and delicate. You won't hear an audible voice speaking to you. You won't see dramatic visions. You won't have some kind of overwhelming mystical experience. But if you stay there, if you resist that powerful urge to start talking, to start asking for things, to start performing the prayer ritual that you've been taught your entire life, something will begin to happen. You'll begin to feel something emerging, a presence that's not external to you, not separate from your being, but closer than your own breath moving in and out, closer than your own heartbeat pulsing in your chest. That's the edge, the threshold of the inner chamber. And when you feel it, when you touch that presence, don't rush forward trying to get somewhere. Don't try to force something to happen through effort. Don't start asking for things or listing out all your needs and desires. Just be there in that space. Stay present in that place. Even if it feels like absolutely nothing's happening. Even if your mind keeps trying to pull you back into thinking, into wanting, into the familiar, comfortable pattern of asking the divine for things, stay put. Hold your ground. Because the door to that inner chamber doesn't open by force or effort. It opens through recognition. And recognition, true recognition, takes time to develop. You might sit there for 5 minutes and feel like nothing's happening at all. You might sit for 10 minutes and think to yourself that you're doing it wrong, that you're failing somehow. But you're not failing. You're not doing it wrong. You're learning how to be still, perhaps for the first time in your life. You're learning what it means to close the door on everything else. You're learning to stop talking long enough to actually listen, instead of just waiting for your turn to speak. You're learning what it feels like to not identify with the voice in your head, to not be defined by the one who's afraid, to not be limited to the one who needs something fixed or provided or changed. You're learning to rest in the presence that's been there all along, waiting patiently for you to notice it. And that's the foundation, the ground floor of everything else. Without this foundational practice, nothing else works, no matter how hard you try. You can learn every prayer technique that exists in the world. You can memorize entire books of scripture. You can fast regularly, worship passionately, and serve others generously. But if you never learn how to enter the inner chamber, if you never learn how to close the door and be still in that space, you'll always be praying from the outside. And the outside, that external place of separation, has no power to change anything. But here's what transforms once you've established that foundational practice in your life, once you've learned to recognize the presence in the inner chamber. There's a second movement that Jesus made, a second step that came after the stillness, after the alignment, after entering the inner chamber and closing the door. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a request. It was a shift in awareness that transformed alignment into authority. It's the difference between praying to the divine and praying as the divine. When Jesus made that statement, "The Father and I are one," he wasn't making some kind of theological claim about his unique divine nature that sets him apart from all other humans. He was describing the interior state he entered before every miracle took place. He was talking about the place where the boundary between self and source dissolved completely, where my will and thy will weren't two different things being negotiated and balanced. They were the same movement flowing in the same direction. And from that place of union, that place of oneness, he didn't ask for miracles to happen. He recognized them. He saw clearly what was already true in the invisible realm, and he spoke it into the visible realm where it could manifest. That's the reason he could say to the paralytic, "Rise and walk," with complete authority flowing through his words. That's the reason he could command the storm to be still and expect obedience. That's the reason he could call Lazarus out of the tomb with confidence. He wasn't hoping the divine would take action. He was taking action from the place where he and the divine were unified. This is what happens when you learn to stay in the inner chamber, when you make it a regular practice. When you close the door and rest in that presence long enough, consistently enough over time, something fundamental shifts in your experience of reality. You stop experiencing yourself as someone separate from the divine who needs to ask for help. You start experiencing yourself as the very place where the will of the divine is expressed and manifested into form. Not because you're special or chosen, not because you've achieved some elevated spiritual status that makes you better than others, but simply because you've stopped being in the way. The personality, the ego, the version of you that's constantly afraid and wanting and needing things to be different. That's what blocks the flow of power from source. And when you enter the inner chamber and close the door, you're temporarily setting that version of yourself aside. You're stepping out of the way so that what's always been there, what's always been true, can move through you without obstruction or interference. Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven, not a geographical place you travel to when you die. A state of consciousness you enter while you're still alive and breathing in a physical body. And he said, it's within you inside in the inner chamber that exists in your own being. Now I want to be absolutely clear about something important. This isn't an instant process. You won't try this practice once tonight and wake up tomorrow morning performing miracles like Jesus did. The inner chamber opens gradually over time. It requires consistent practice, deep patience, and a willingness to sit in what feels like apparent nothingness, while your nervous system slowly learns to recognize a frequency it's not accustomed to perceiving. But it does open. And when it does finally open to you, prayer stops being something you do directed toward the divine and becomes something you do originating from the divine. Your words carry a different weight and power. Your intentions align with a larger intelligence that moves through all things, and reality begins to respond differently because you're no longer operating from separation. You're operating from source itself. This is what the mystics knew and practiced. This is what the desert fathers and mothers did in the wilderness. This is what contemplative Christians have been practicing in monasteries and hermitages for 2,000 years, while the broader church gradually forgot how to teach it to ordinary people. But this knowledge was never meant to be locked away in monasteries accessible only to monks. It was meant for anyone willing to learn, anyone willing to stop talking long enough to listen, anyone willing to enter the inner chamber and discover what's been waiting there all along. So here's what I'm asking you to do, what I'm inviting you to commit to. Don't just watch this video and move on to the next thing. Actually, try this practice tonight or tomorrow morning, or whenever you have 10 minutes of uninterrupted time available. Sit down somewhere. Close your eyes. Breathe naturally. Let go of the noise filling your mind. Feel around for the stillness that exists behind your thoughts. And when you find it, when you touch that presence, even for a brief moment, stay there in that space. Don't ask for anything. Don't try to make anything happen through effort. Just be present in that space. Learn what it feels like in your body and awareness. Train yourself to recognize it so you can find it again. Because once you know how to find the inner chamber, once you've closed the door even one single time, you can always return to it. And the more times you return, the more natural it becomes, until one day you realize something profound: you're not visiting that place anymore. You're living there. That's when prayer stops being a practice you do at certain times and becomes your permanent state of being. That's when you finally understand what Jesus actually meant when he said, "The kingdom of heaven is at hand." Not coming someday in the future. Not located somewhere else. Right here, right now, within you. If this resonated somewhere deep inside you, if something in your being recognized the truth of what we've explored here together, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone you know who's been searching for a deeper way to pray. Leave a like if this gave you something valuable. Because the more people who discover the inner chamber, the more people who learn to close the door and align with Source, the more this entire world transforms from the inside out. Now go be still and discover what's been waiting for you in the silence.